So for our next project, we're going to be making a Space Invaders clone. So open up Unity and select 2D project, and we name it something appropriate like Space Invader project. Save it somewhere appropriate and click create. Okay, so we've got the Unity project open in its default layout. I'm just going to move a few bits and pieces around. So the console, I'm just going to stick at this side and use it as a kind of way to not block out anything that I want to show you with my face. And I'm also going to move the game view down here so that when I'm editing the project, when I'm running it, I can just sort of see how it's going to look to the player. This first video is just going to go through a few setup things, so it shouldn't be too long. So just initially, we have set up a 2D project. So if we click the camera object, we should see that going through its settings, we've got this projection setting, which is set to orthographic, which is correct because that essentially just means it will be a flat projection rather than using perspective in any sense. The next thing we just want to look at is, or just to make you aware of, is the size setting. So size is the distance in pixels from the center of the camera's viewpoint to the top, multiplied by 100. So in this case, the size is 5, which means that from the central point of our view to the top of the viewport is 500, which gives us a total height of 1000. So if I wanted to have 1080, for example, I would change this value to 5.4. That's because 5.4 multiplied by 100 is 450, multiplied by 2 gives us 1080. The other thing that we need to just make sure is that instead of having free aspect as our view space, because if I edit this view down here, it edits the actual view of the game, whereas we don't want that. We don't want the game to be square, we don't want it to be this shape, we want it to be just like a normal standard 16:9 ratio. So click the free aspect drop down and click on 16:9, and then even if I adjust this window, the view of our game should stay the same. Next, I'm just going to import some sprites. So a sprite is essentially a 2D representation or an image, and I'm going to place that into our scene and start making some edits. Notice in this project, we're not creating a canvas or anything to do with the UI just yet. So we're working solely in the game space. So before I import some sprites, I'm just going to right click in my assets folder, click create a new folder, call this one sprites. To keep things organized, and then in there you can go right click and import new assets, and then I could find the sprites, but just as easily you can bring in a folder which contains some of the assets that you want to drag in. So in this case I've got an enemy sprite, a ship sprite, and a bullet sprite. If you want to create your own sprites for this, the enemy and the ship are 64 by 64 pixels in size, and the bullet is 16 by 32. So 16 width, 32 height. The first thing that we're going to do is sort out our player's behavior and movement of things. So drag a copy of this ship sprite into the scene. So the first things first, we want to code in some movement to our player sprite. So in order to do that, we need to add a physics component. Because we're going to sort of manipulate it in its physical space using forces, and so in order to do that we need to add a rigid body, but in this case we need to add a rigid body 2D because this is a 2D game, it's a 2D object. So that's, I'll added all that on now. If you hit the play button now, what you'll see in the game view is that when the game starts, the box will just drop off the edge of the screen. And so this is obviously because we've enabled physics properties to it, it's reacting to gravity, there's nothing underneath it with any collision to stop it from falling, and so it'll just fall endlessly. To avoid this, because we don't want that to happen, this is going to be like a Space Invader, so this is our turret. We're going to use it to just move around the bottom of the screen and fire things, but we just want it to sort of stay on that y-axis. We don't want it to move up and down. So if you go to your rigid body 2D component just here, down at the bottom you've got this constraints option. If you just click that, there's a few abilities that you can have. So you can freeze its position on X and Y and freeze its rotation. So in this case we want to freeze its Y coordinate. So if we look up here, you've got position X, Y and Z. So the X coordinate, the X axis is its left and right movement. If we adjust that, and if we adjust its Y coordinate, it moves up and down. We don't want it to do that, so we just click freeze the Y and it won't move up and down at all, or react to it. If it reacts to forces, it'll just stay on that same axis. We can also freeze the rotation here, just in case it gets hit by anything. We don't want it to spin around on the Z axis, because even though it's 2D, we still do have a Z axis in this. So if you, just to demonstrate this, if you go up here to where it says 2D and click that, the game will change to the old three-dimensional view, and you can kind of see, okay, the camera's here, it's orthographic projection rather than perspective, and so it will just sort of shows literally everything on this side moving on sort of forever into the distance. You can sort of see over there, but you can see that we do have Z coordinates and we can manipulate that. So say for example you wanted one object to appear in front of another in a 2D space, then you would do that by manipulating this Z value to rearrange the scene and make sure things are placed where they should be. Just going to reset all that stuff. If it's rotating on that Z axis, so it's rotating around like that, we don't really want that to happen, so we'll freeze that. And now if we hit play, the cube should just stay where it needs to be. So it doesn't move at all. That's it for the setting up. Next we'll create a script for our player and start coding in some behavior.